She had exactly $100 to her name. $100 was supposed to buy her daughter's asthma medication. $100 stood between Chloe breathing easily and Chloe gasping for air in the middle of the night. But when Grace Williams saw the gardener sitting alone behind the mansion, his head in his hands, his voice cracking as he begged someone on the phone for more time, she didn't think about the medication. She thought about kindness. "Here." Grace pressed the crumpled bills into his calloused palm. "Take it. Whatever you need it for, take it." The man looked up at her, blue eyes filled with shock, disbelief, something else she couldn't name. "I can't take this," he said. "You don't even know me." "I know you're hurting. That's enough." His name was Daniel. At least that's what he told her. He was a temp worker, he said, just hired to trim the hedges for the summer. Couldn't afford his mother's heart medication. I was about to lose everything. Grace didn't know that every word was a lie. She didn't know that Daniel had never trimmed a hedge in his life. She didn't know that his mother wasn't sick. She was upstairs in the East Wing, sipping champagne. She didn't know that the mansion behind them didn't just employ him. It belonged to him. His real name was Marcus Harrington III. Net worth, $4.7 billion, and he had spent the last 3 weeks pretending to be poor for one simple reason: to find out who in his household had a heart worth keeping. Grace had just passed the test. She had no idea what was coming next. Grace Williams had learned to move like a ghost. She slipped through the service entrance of the Harrington estate before the sun touched the horizon, her worn sneakers silent on the marble floors. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. "Chloe's still sleeping. Breathing okay. Don't worry." Grace always worried. She tied on her apron, grabbed her cleaning cart, and began the ritual she had performed 6 days a week for the past 2 years. Dust the chandeliers, polish the silver, scrub the floors until they gleam like mirrors. Make the mansion perfect for people who would never notice the hands that kept it that way. The Harrington estate was one of the largest private residences in Connecticut. 47 rooms, 12 bathrooms, a staff of 23. And at the top of the food chain sat Victoria Price, the estate manager who ruled the mansion like a medieval queen. Grace had just finished the library when Victoria's heels clicked down the hallway. "Williams," Grace straightened. "Yes, ma'am?" Victoria Price was 52 years old, blonde, and permanently dissatisfied. She wore designer suits that cost more than Grace's monthly rent and looked at the cleaning staff like they were stains she hadn't figured out how to remove. She ran a manicured finger along the bookshelf and examined it with theatrical disgust. "Is this what you call clean?" Grace looked at the shelf. It was spotless. She had wiped it twice. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll do it again." "You'll do the entire room again and dock yourself an hour's pay for the inconvenience." Victoria smiled coldly. "Standards, Williams. This household has standards. If you can't meet them, there are 100 women who would kill for your position." Grace swallowed the words she wanted to say. She needed this job. Chloe needed this job. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Williams, Mr. Harrington Sr. is expecting guests this weekend. I need every surface in the East Wing to be immaculate. You'll work Saturday and Sunday. No overtime pay. Consider it a privilege to serve." She swept away without waiting for a response. Grace stood alone in the library, her hands trembling. Not from anger, from exhaustion. She had been working double shifts for 3 months to cover Chloe's medical bills. Her daughter's asthma had worsened in the spring, and the new inhaler cost $400 a month. Money Grace didn't have. But she couldn't quit, couldn't complain, couldn't do anything but smile and scrub and pretend that every cruel word didn't cut a little deeper. She pulled out her phone and looked at the photo on her lock screen. Chloe, age 7, grinning with her 2 missing front teeth. The reason Grace got up at 4 a.m., the reason she endured Victoria's abuse, the reason she kept going when everything in her wanted to stop. "Just a few more months," Grace whispered to the photo. "Mama's going to figure this out." She put the phone away and started cleaning the library again. 2 hours later, she was polishing the windows in the East Wing when she saw him. A man in dirty overalls, kneeling in the garden below. He was pulling weeds with the awkward movements of someone who had clearly never done manual labor before. His brown hair was messy. His face was smudged with dirt. And when one of the senior gardeners walked past and deliberately kicked soil onto his work, he just took it, said nothing, kept working. Grace watched him for a long moment. Something about him seemed familiar. Not his face. She was certain she'd never seen him before. But something in his eyes. The quiet dignity of a person being treated like dirt and choosing not to fight back. She knew that look. She wore it every day. Grace took her lunch breaks alone. The other maids clustered together at the long wooden table, gossiping about which rooms they hated cleaning and which family members were the worst. Grace had learned early that joining them meant being asked questions she didn't want to answer. "Why do you work so many shifts? Why don't you ever go out? Why do you look so tired all the time? Easier to eat alone by the garden window." She was unwrapping her sandwich. Peanut butter and jelly, the same thing she'd eaten every day for 2 years, when the back door opened. The new gardener stepped inside. Up close, he looked even more out of place than he had. From the window, his overalls were too clean, like they'd been bought yesterday. His hands were soft. No calluses, no scars, no evidence of a man who worked with soil for a living. And his posture was wrong. Straight-backed, confident, like someone pretending to be smaller than they actually were. He glanced around the kitchen, clearly looking for somewhere to sit. The senior gardener, a thick-necked man named Bruno, blocked his path. "Temp workers eat outside," Bruno said loudly. "This kitchen is for permanent staff." "I was just hoping to—" "Did I stutter?" Bruno stepped closer. "Outside, with the rest of the dirt." The other staff laughed. Not all of them, but enough. The new gardener's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He turned toward the door. "Wait." The word left Grace's mouth before she could stop it. Everyone turned to look at her. Bruno's eyes narrowed. "What did you say, Williams?" Grace's heart hammered against her ribs. She hated confrontation, hated drawing attention to herself. But something about watching this stranger be humiliated made her stomach turn. "There's no rule about temp workers eating inside," she said quietly. "I checked the staff handbook when I started. Section 4, paragraph 12. All employees are entitled to use common areas during designated break times." Silence. Bruno's face reddened. "You think you're clever?" "I think I can read." More silence. The other staff exchanged glances. Nobody talked back to Bruno. Nobody talked back to anyone with seniority. Bruno took a step toward Grace, then stopped. Victoria's voice echoed from somewhere down the hall, and he clearly didn't want to be caught causing a scene. "Whatever," he muttered. "Let the temp sit with the other trash." He shouldered past the new gardener and left. The rest of the staff returned to their conversations, pointedly ignoring both Grace and the stranger. The gardener stood frozen for a moment. Then he walked to Grace's table and sat down across from her. "Thank you," he said. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He studied her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, like he was memorizing her, filing her away. "I'm Daniel," he said finally. "Daniel Moore." The slight hesitation before his last name was so brief that Grace almost missed it. Grace Williams. She pushed half her sandwich across the table. You didn't bring lunch? I wasn't sure I'd get a break. Everyone gets a break, even temps, even... She smiled slightly. Dirt. Daniel laughed. It was a warm sound, surprised out of him, like he hadn't expected to find anything funny in this place. You're different from the others, he said. I'm just tired. Grace took a bite of her sandwich. Too tired to be cruel. It takes energy to treat people badly. Energy I don't have. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his blue eyes. A flicker of respect, maybe, or something deeper. Then I hope you never find that energy, he said quietly. The world needs more people like you, Grace Williams. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she just kept eating her sandwich, and tried not to notice how his hands were far too soft for a gardener. Grace was polishing the banister when Victoria's voice cut through the mansion like a knife. All staff to the foyer, now! The command echoed through the halls. Within minutes, the entire household had assembled. Maids, gardeners, cooks, drivers, security. 23 people standing in nervous rows while Victoria Price paced before them like a general addressing troops before battle. Grace found a spot near the back. Daniel slipped in beside her, still wearing his dirt-stained overalls. What's happening? He whispered. Nothing good. Victoria stopped pacing. Her face was arranged in an expression of theatrical devastation. This morning, she announced, I conducted my weekly inventory of the household valuables, and I discovered something deeply disturbing. She paused for effect. The Harrington Silver Collection, 12 pieces dating back to 1847, valued at over $50,000, is missing. Gasps rippled through the staff. Grace felt her stomach drop. Someone in this room, Victoria continued, is a thief. Her eyes swept the assembled workers, slowly, deliberately, and then they stopped. On Grace. Williams, step forward. Grace's blood turned to ice. Ma'am? I said step forward. Grace moved through the crowd on legs that felt like water. She could feel every eye on her, could hear the whispers starting already. Victoria circled her like a shark. You were assigned to clean the silver room yesterday, were you not? Yes, ma'am. But And you were the last person to sign out of that wing? I finished my shift at 6, but I didn't. The security logs show you entered the silver room at 3:47 p.m. and didn't leave until 5:23 p.m. Victoria's voice dripped with false sympathy. That's a long time to polish a few spoons. Williams, what were you really doing in there? I was cleaning. The room was filthy. Someone had spilled wine on the display cases. It took time to... Enough. Victoria held up her hand. I'm not interested in excuses. I'm interested in facts. And the facts tell me that $50,000 worth of antique silver vanished while you were alone in that room. Grace's vision blurred. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. I didn't steal anything, she said, her voice cracking. I've worked here for 2 years. I've never taken so much as a paperclip. Please, you have to believe me. What I believe is irrelevant. What matters is evidence. Victoria smiled coldly. The police will be conducting an investigation. Until then, you are suspended without pay. You will not leave the premises. And if I find those silver pieces in your possession... She leaned close to Grace's ear. I will personally ensure you never work in this state again. Victoria turned to the rest of the staff. Back to work, all of you, and remember, I'm watching. The crowd dispersed. Grace stood frozen in the foyer, tears streaming down her face. Suspended without pay. Investigation. Police. Chloe's medication was due in 3 days. A hand touched her elbow. Grace flinched, expecting Victoria's cruelty. Instead, she found herself looking into the weathered face of Rosa Martinez, the head cook. Rosa was 57 years old, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that had seen too much. She had worked at the estate for 15 years, longer than anyone except the groundskeeper. "Come with me," Rosa whispered. "Kitchen. Now." Grace followed her through the service corridors, too numb to question. In the kitchen, Rosa pressed a paper bag into Grace's hands. Inside, a container of soup, fresh bread, and an envelope. "For Chloe," Rosa said quietly. "The envelope has $200. Don't argue. I've been saving it for emergencies. Rosa, I can't." "You can, and you will." Rosa gripped her shoulders. "Listen to me, Grace. I know you didn't steal that silver, and I'm going to help you prove it." "How?" Rosa glanced toward the door. Her voice dropped even lower. "Because I know who did." Grace needed air. After Rosa's cryptic warning, her mind was spinning. Who stole the silver? Why was Rosa afraid to say more? And how was Grace supposed to prove her innocence when the entire household had already decided she was guilty? She slipped out the service entrance and walked toward the garden, hoping the evening breeze would clear her head. That's when she heard the voice. "Please, I'm begging you, just 2 more weeks." Grace stopped. The voice was coming from behind the hedge maze, desperate, broken, nothing like the calm tone she'd heard at lunch. She crept closer. Daniel sat on a stone bench, his phone pressed to his ear. His shoulders were hunched. His free hand gripped his knee so hard his knuckles had turned white. "I know the payment is overdue. No. But my mother, she needs the medication. Without it, her heart—" He paused, listening. His face crumpled. "There has to be something. A payment plan. Anything. I get paid next week. I can give you half then and—" Silence. "Hello? Hello?" He lowered the phone. Stared at it. Then dropped his head into his hands. Grace watched him for a long moment. She thought about Chloe. About the inhaler that costs $400. About the $200 Rosa had just given her. Money that was supposed to last until she could clear her name. She thought about the cruelty she had witnessed today. The way Bruno had humiliated Daniel. The way Victoria had publicly destroyed her. The way this world seemed designed to crush anyone who didn't have power. And she made a decision. She stepped around the hedge. Daniel looked up, quickly wiping his eyes. "Grace, I didn't— How long have you been— Long enough." She sat beside him on the bench. "Your mother's sick?" He nodded slowly. "Heart condition. The medication costs more than I make in a month. I've been trying to—" He stopped, laughed bitterly. "Why am I telling you this? You have your own problems. I heard what happened with Victoria." "Doesn't matter." Grace reached into her pocket. Her fingers found the envelope Rosa had given her. $200. Chloe's medication money. The only safety net she had left. She pulled out 5 20s, her last 100, and pressed them into Daniel's hand. "Take it." Daniel stared at the money. Then at her. His blue eyes filled with something she couldn't read. "I can't take this. You don't even know me. I know you're hurting." Grace closed his fingers around the bills. "That's enough. Grace, take it. Please, for your mother." Daniel looked at her for a long, trembling moment, and for just a second, his mask slipped. She saw something beneath the humble gardener, something vast and complicated, and deeply, deeply moved. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you do— Why, this?" Grace smiled sadly. "Because someone has to be kind, even when the world isn't." She stood and walked away before he could see her cry. The investigator arrived in a black sedan with tinted windows. Grace watched from the servants' quarters as he stepped out, a thin man in a cheap suit, with slicked back hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. Victoria greeted him at the front entrance like he was visiting royalty. "Mr. Crane," Victoria said warmly. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Happy to help, Ms. Price." His voice was oily, rehearsed. Theft of this magnitude requires delicate handling. Grace's stomach churned. Something about the man felt wrong. The way he looked at Victoria. The way she looked at him. Like they were performing a scene they had rehearsed together. By noon, Crane had interviewed half the staff. Grace watched her co-workers file in and out of the study, their faces ranging from nervous to smug. Bruno came out smiling. The other maids avoided her eyes. At 2 p.m., it was Grace's turn. The study felt smaller with Crane sitting behind the desk, his fingers steepled like a villain in a cheap movie. "Miss Williams," he gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." Grace sat. "I've reviewed the security logs," Crane said, flipping through a folder. "You were alone in the silver room for over 90 minutes. Can you explain why?" "I was cleaning. The room was, yes, wine in the display cases. So you've said." He smiled thinly. "The problem, Miss Williams, is that no one else remembers any wine being spilled. That's because I cleaned it before anyone saw." "How convenient." Grace's hands trembled in her lap. "I didn't steal anything. I've never stolen anything in my life." Crane made a note in his folder. "Tell me about your daughter." Grace froze. "What?" "Chloe, isn't it? 7 years old, chronic asthma." He looked up with false sympathy. "Medical bills must be overwhelming." "Leave my daughter out of this." "I'm simply establishing motive, Miss Williams. A desperate mother with mounting debts, access to valuable antiques. It's not hard to see how someone in your position might be tempted." "I wasn't tempted. I didn't do it." Crane closed the folder. "We'll see. In the meantime, I suggest you don't leave the premises. And, Miss Williams?" He leaned forward. "If you know where those silver pieces are, now would be the time to speak up. Cooperation goes a long way in situations like this." Grace stood on shaking legs. "Are we done?" "For now." She walked out of the study with her head held high and nearly collided with Daniel in the hallway. "Grace." His face was tight with concern. "Are you okay? I heard they're questioning everyone about the silver." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're shaking." He reached for her hand, then stopped himself. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing I haven't heard before." Grace forced a smile. "I'm used to being the suspect." "Poor people always are." Daniel's jaw tightened. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe. Or guilt. "This isn't right," he said quietly. "None of this is right." Since when has right mattered to people like them? She walked away before he could answer. But as she turned the corner, she glanced back and saw Daniel watching her with an expression she couldn't decode. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. And for just a moment, he didn't look like a gardener at all. 3 days later. Daniel was asking too many questions. Grace first noticed it in the kitchen when he cornered one of the junior maids and asked about the security cameras. Which ones worked? Which ones were just for show? Who had access to the footage? Then she saw him in the garden, talking to the groundskeeper about delivery schedules. Who came and went? What trucks arrived after hours? And twice she caught him near Victoria's office, pretending to trim hedges that didn't need trimming. His head tilted toward the window like he was listening. The other staff noticed, too. "Your boyfriend's a spy," Bruno said loudly as Grace passed him in the corridor. Saw him taking notes behind the greenhouse, writing down names. Bet he's reporting to Victoria. "He's not my boyfriend." "Whatever he is, he's trouble," Bruno smirked. "Maybe he's the one who stole the silver. Ever think of that?" New guy shows up, things start disappearing? Classic. Grace ignored him and kept walking. But the seed was planted. That evening she found Daniel in his usual spot, the stone bench behind the hedge maze. He was scribbling in a small notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What are you writing?" Daniel startled. The notebook snapped shut. "Grace, I didn't hear you." "Clearly." She sat beside him, keeping a careful distance. "People are talking about you. People are always talking. They're saying you're a spy, that you're gathering information for Victoria." She paused. "Or that you're the one who stole the silver?" Daniel laughed, but it was hollow. "And what do you think?" Grace studied him, the soft hands, the two clean overalls. The way he spoke was like someone who had read about gardening but never actually done it. "I think you're not who you say you are." Silence stretched between them. Daniel looked away, his jaw tight. "Would it matter? If I wasn't? Depends on who you really are. And if I told you I was just a guy trying to do the right thing, would you believe me?" Grace thought about the $100 she had given him, the mother who needed medication, the desperate phone call she had overheard. "I believed you when you said you were hurting," she said quietly. "I believed you when you took my last dollar for your mother. So either that was real, or you're a better liar than anyone I've ever met." Daniel turned to face her. His blue eyes were intense, searching. "It was real," he said. "Not the way you think, but the feeling—" He stopped, started again. "No one has ever done anything like that for me, Grace. Given me something they couldn't afford to lose. Expected nothing in return. I didn't do it for gratitude." "I know. That's what makes it matter." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded $100 bill, the same one she had given him. "I can't keep this." Grace pushed his hand away. My mother is fine. She's—" He caught himself. Something flickered across his face. Pain. Guilt. The weight of a lie he wasn't ready to release. "She's going to be fine, but you need this more than I do. Your daughter's medication. Take it back." "Daniel, please," his voice cracked. "I've taken enough from you already." Grace looked at the money, then at him. The desperation in his eyes wasn't about $100. It was about something deeper, something she couldn't see yet. "Keep it," she said finally. "Give it to someone who needs it. Pay it forward." Daniel stared at her as she spoke in a language he didn't understand. "You're real," he whispered. "You're actually real." "I don't know what that means." "It means—" He stopped, shook his head. "It means I need to finish what I started. And when I do, I promise you'll understand everything." He stood and walked toward the mansion without looking back. Grace watched him go, and for the first time, she wondered if the man she had trusted wasn't a gardener at all. Grace couldn't sleep. The investigation was closing in. Crane had searched her locker that afternoon and found nothing, but the look on his face said he wasn't finished. Victoria had extended her suspension indefinitely, and Chloe's medication was due tomorrow. She needed to think, and the only place she could think of was the garden. The night air was cool as Grace slipped outside. The mansion loomed behind her, its windows dark except for the east wing where the Harrington family resided. She walked the familiar path toward the hedge maze. And stopped. Light spilled from the garden shed, Daniel's shed. Grace approached quietly. The door was slightly ajar, warm light bleeding through the crack. She heard nothing inside. No movement, no voices. She pushed the door open. The shed was empty, but Daniel's things were scattered across the workbench. His notebook, a change of clothes, a phone charger, and a wallet. Grace knew she shouldn't touch it, knew it was a violation of privacy. but something pulled her forward. The same instinct that had told her Daniel wasn't who he claimed to be. She picked up the wallet and opened it. Her heart stopped. Inside was a driver's license. The photo was unmistakably Daniel. Same blue eyes, same strong jaw, same face she had shared her lunch with. But the name wasn't Daniel Moore. Marcus Harrington III. Grace's hands trembled. She flipped through the rest of the wallet. A black American Express card. A membership to a private club in Manhattan. A business card that read, Harrington Industries, CEO. The gardener she had given her last $100 to was the billionaire who owned the mansion. The wallet slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Everything made sense now. The soft hands, the wrong posture, the questions, the notes. The way he moved through the estate was like someone cataloging every detail. He wasn't investigating the theft. He was investigating them. And she, the desperate maid who had sacrificed her daughter's medication money for a stranger, had been part of his test all along. Grace pressed her hand to her mouth to stop the sob from escaping. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Grace. She turned. Marcus Harrington III stood in the doorway, his face pale in the moonlight. I can explain. Grace backed away from him until she hit the workbench. Don't. Her voice shook with fury. Don't you dare say my name like we're friends. Grace, please. Marcus. She spat the name like poison. That's your real name, isn't it? Marcus Harrington, the third, as in third-generation billionaire. As in, your family owns this mansion. As in, everything you told me was a lie. Marcus stepped into the shed, his hands raised. Not everything. Which part was true? Grace's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. The part where you pretended to be poor? The part where you let me share my lunch with you like some charity case? Or the part where you watched me give you my last $100, money I needed for my daughter's medicine, while you stood there knowing you could buy this entire estate 1,000 times over? Marcus flinched as she struck him. I was going to tell you. When? After you finished your little experiment? Grace laughed bitterly. That's what this is, isn't it? A test. The rich man plays dress-up to see how the servants behave when they think no one as important is watching. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me, Marcus. Use small words so the stupid maid can understand. Marcus's composure cracked. He ran a hand through his hair, the same gesture she had found endearing when he was Daniel. Now it just looked like another performance. My father is dying, he said quietly. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. He's been running this estate from the East Wing, too sick to see what's really happening. But he heard things. Reports of staff being mistreated, money disappearing, a manager who rules through fear. Victoria. Victoria. Marcus nodded. My father asked me to come here, to see for myself, to find out who was loyal, really loyal, and who was just playing a part. He met her eyes. I've been here 3 weeks, Grace, and in that time, do you know how many people treated me with basic human decency? Grace said nothing. 1. Marcus stepped closer. 1 person. You. Everyone else. The gardeners, the maids, the cooks. They either ignored me, mocked me, or tried to use me for information. But you shared your food with a stranger. You stood up to Bruno, when no one else would. And when you thought I was desperate, you gave me everything you had. So I passed your test. Congratulations to me. Grace's voice cracked. Do I get a gold star? A raise? Maybe a pat on the head from the benevolent billionaire? You get the truth. Marcus reached for her hand. She pulled away. Grace, the silver theft. Victoria staged it. She's been embezzling from the estate for years. Crane isn't a real investigator. He's her accomplice. They're framing you to cover their tracks. And you know this how? Because I've been gathering evidence. The notes you saw me taking. Names, dates, transactions. I have enough to put Victoria away for a decade. Grace wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But the wound was too fresh. The betrayal too deep. "Why should I trust you?" she whispered. "You've been lying to me since the moment we met." "Because I'm telling you the truth now, and because—" He stopped, swallowed. "Because what I feel for you isn't part of any test." Before Grace could respond, movement outside the window caught her eye. Two figures stood near the kitchen entrance, illuminated by the security light. One was Victoria, her blonde hair unmistakable. The other was Rosa. Grace watched as Rosa handed Victoria a folded piece of paper. Victoria read it, smiled, and patted Rosa's shoulder like she was rewarding a loyal dog. Grace's blood turned to ice. "No," she breathed. Rosa, the woman who had given her money, who had promised to help prove her innocence, was reporting to Victoria. She was alone. She had always been alone. The next morning. 8 a.m. The announcement came over the intercom like a death sentence. "All staff to the grand foyer. Mandatory meeting. 5 minutes." Grace hadn't slept. She had spent the night in her quarters, replaying the scene outside the kitchen window. Rosa's face, Victoria's smile, the paper is changing hands. She had trusted Rosa, believed her, and now— Grace, Marcus, appeared at her door, dressed in his gardener's clothes. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "Rosa isn't what you think. Last night, what you saw. I saw the woman who promised to help me handing information to the person trying to destroy me." Grace pushed past him. "I saw exactly what I needed to see." "You saw what Victoria wanted you to see. Grace, please." "The meeting's starting." Grace kept walking. "I suggest you attend, Mr. Harrington. Wouldn't want to miss the show." The grand foyer was packed when she arrived. Every staff member stood in rigid rows. Maids, gardeners, cooks, drivers. Victoria Price commanded the center of the room, flanked by Crane and 2 uniformed police officers. Grace's heart stopped. "Thank you all for coming," Victoria announced, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "I'll keep this brief. After an exhaustive investigation, Mr. Crane has uncovered irrefutable evidence identifying the person responsible for stealing the Harrington. Silver." She paused, savoring the moment. "The thief is Grace Williams." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Grace felt every eye turn toward her, some pitying, most vindicated. Bruno smirked openly. "Evidence was discovered in her vehicle this morning," Crane added smoothly. 3 pieces of the stolen silver, hidden beneath the spare tire. Combined with the security footage and witness testimony, we have more than enough for an arrest. "I didn't," Grace started. "Officers." Victoria nodded toward the police. "Take her." The officers moved forward. Grace stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. Hands grabbed her arms. Cold metal clicked around her wrists. Handcuffs. She was being handcuffed in front of everyone. "Please." Grace's voice broke. "I didn't do this. Someone planted that evidence. I've never stolen anything in my life." Victoria leaned close, her perfume suffocating. "Should have thought about that before you crossed me," she whispered. Then, louder, "Take her! Away!" As the officers dragged Grace toward the door, she searched the crowd for Marcus. He was gone. The billionaire who had promised her the truth had vanished when she needed him most. Grace closed her eyes and let them take her. 23 staff members watched Grace Williams be dragged toward the door in handcuffs. Some looked away. Most didn't. Grace kept her head high. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not Victoria with her triumphant smile. Not Bruno with his satisfied smirk. Not the co-workers who had eaten beside her for 2 years and now stared like she was a stranger. "Wait." Grace's voice cut through the murmurs. The officers paused. "I want to make a phone call," she said. "I have a daughter. She's 7 years old. She's waiting for me to come home." Victoria rolled her eyes. "You should have thought about your daughter before you decided to steal from this family." "I didn't steal anything. The evidence says otherwise." "The evidence was planted." Grace turned to face the crowd, the people she had worked beside, served beside, suffered beside. 2 years. I've worked here for 2 years. I've cleaned your rooms. I've covered your shifts. I've kept your secrets. And in all that time, have any of you ever known me to take something that wasn't mine? Silence. "She's stalling," Crane said impatiently. "Officers, remove her." "One phone call." Grace's voice didn't waver. "That's all I'm asking. Let me tell my daughter I love her before you take me away for something I didn't do." The officers exchanged glances. One of them, younger, with kind eyes, nodded. "One call. Make it quick." Grace pulled her phone from her pocket with trembling hands. She dialed Mrs. Patterson's number. It rang twice. "Hello?" "Mrs. Patterson, it's Grace." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to tell Chloe that Mama loves her. Tell her I'll be home as soon as I can. Tell her to be brave." "Grace? What's happening? Are you—" "Just tell her, please." She ended the call before she could cry. Victoria slow-clapped. How touching. The martyr mother act. Very convincing. She waved her hand. "Get her out of my sight." The officers gripped Grace's arms. She took one last look at the foyer, the chandeliers she had dusted, the floors she had scrubbed, the life she had built in this place that had never truly been hers. Then she saw Rosa. The cook stood at the edge of the crowd, her weathered face unreadable. Their eyes met, and Rosa did something strange. She smiled. Not a guilty smile, not an apologetic smile, a smile that said, "Wait." Before Grace could process it, the front doors of the mansion flew open, sunlight flooded the foyer, and a black Rolls-Royce rolled to a stop at the entrance. Everyone turned. The driver's door opened, then the rear passenger door, and Marcus Harrington III stepped out, not in dirty overalls and muddy boots, but in a charcoal gray suit that cost more than Grace's annual salary. His hair was styled, his jaw was clean-shaven, his blue eyes were cold as ice. Behind him, 2 attendants helped an elderly man out of the car and into a wheelchair. Grace recognized him from the portraits in the East Wing. Harrington Sr., the patriarch, the real owner of the estate. Victoria's face went white. "Mr. Harrington," she stammered, "we weren't expecting—" "No," Marcus said quietly. "You weren't." The foyer fell deathly silent. Marcus walked through the crowd, like Moses parting the sea. Staff members stumbled over themselves to move out of his way. The same people who had mocked Daniel, ignored him, and kicked dirt on his work. Now they couldn't meet his eyes. Victoria recovered first. She always did. "Mr. Harrington, Marcus, what a wonderful surprise." Her voice was honey poured over broken glass. "Your father didn't mention you'd be visiting. If I had known, I would have prepared a proper welcome." "I'm sure you would have." Marcus stopped in front of her. "You're very good at preparation, aren't you, Victoria? Very good at making sure everything looks exactly the way you want it to look." "I don't understand what you—" "Release her." Victoria blinked. "Excuse me?" "The woman in handcuffs." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Release her. Now." "Marcus, I understand this might be uncomfortable, but the evidence clearly shows—" "I said, release her." The officers looked between Marcus and Victoria, uncertain. Crane stepped forward, his oily smile firmly in place. "Mr. Harrington, I appreciate your concern, but this is a criminal matter. The evidence against Miss Williams is overwhelming. We found the stolen silver in her vehicle. The security logs were altered. Marcus pulled a folder from inside his jacket. The timestamps were modified 3 days ago by someone with administrator access. Would you like to guess who has that access, Mr. Crane? Crane's smile faltered. The silver in her vehicle was planted. Marcus pulled out another document. I have footage from a private camera I installed in the parking lot. It shows 2 individuals placing items in Miss Williams' trunk at 3:47 this morning. Would you like to see their faces? He held up a photograph. The color drained from Crane's face. The photo showed him and Victoria, caught mid-act, silver candlesticks in their hands. Officers. Marcus turned to the police. You've been misled. The real thieves are standing right in front of you. This is absurd. Victoria's composure finally cracked. This is a fabrication. He's lying to protect his little charity case. Am I? A new voice cut through the chaos. Everyone turned. Rosa Martinez stepped forward from the crowd, but she wasn't dressed as a cook anymore. She wore a simple black suit, and in her hand she carried a thick manila folder. My name is Rosa Martinez, she said calmly. For the past 18 months, I've been working as an internal investigator for Harrington Industries, placed in this household at the request of Mr. Harrington Sr. Grace's mind reeled. Rosa wasn't a traitor. She was... The document I gave Victoria last night, Rosa continued, was a list of fabricated evidence I claimed to have found against Grace Williams. I needed Victoria to believe I was on her side so she would move forward with the arrest. She opened the folder. What Victoria didn't know is that I've spent 18 months documenting her crimes: embezzlement, fraud, wage theft, falsifying employment records, and now framing an innocent woman for a crime she committed herself. Rosa handed the folder to the officers. It's all there. Every receipt, every transaction, every lie. Victoria's face twisted with rage. She spun toward Grace. You! This is your fault! You and your pathetic... Victoria. Marcus's voice was quiet. Final. You're done. Victoria lunged at Grace. She didn't make it 2 steps. Marcus intercepted her, his hand catching her wrist with a grip that made her gasp. Officers, he said calmly, I believe you have enough evidence to make an arrest. The correct arrest this time. The younger officer stepped forward, pulling out a fresh set of handcuffs. Victoria Price, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and filing a false police report. You have the right to remain silent. You can't do this, Victoria thrashed against the officer's grip. I've given 15 years to this family. 15 years! I kept this estate running while your father rotted in his bed and you played businessman in Manhattan. You stole from this family, Marcus said quietly. You abused the people who worked for you. And when you got caught, you tried to destroy an innocent woman to save yourself. She's nobody. She's a maid. She's worth more than you'll ever understand. The officer finished cuffing Victoria. She screamed as they dragged her toward the door, ugly animal sounds that echoed off the marble walls. This isn't over, Marcus. I know things. I know secrets about this family that will... The door slammed shut behind her. Silence. Then Marcus turned to Crane. The investigator was already backing toward the service entrance, his face slick with sweat. Mr. Harrington, I was just doing my job. Victoria hired me. She told me the evidence was legitimate. I had no idea. You planted evidence in an innocent woman's vehicle. Marcus's voice was ice. You tried to send a single mother to prison so your employer could cover up her crimes. I was following orders. So were the officers who just arrested Victoria. Marcus nodded to the police. Add him to the collection. Crane didn't resist. He went limp as the handcuffs closed around his wrists, all the oily confidence drained out of him like water from a broken cup. 2 down. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned to face the assembled staff, 21 people frozen in various states of shock, fear, and dawning comprehension. 3 weeks ago, Marcus said, I came to this estate disguised as a temporary gardener. I wanted to see how this household really operated, how the people who work here treat each other when they think no one is important is watching. He began to walk slowly through the crowd. Bruno Castellanos. Bruno flinched. You kicked dirt on my work. You told me temp workers were trash. You made sure I knew exactly where I stood in your hierarchy. Bruno's face went gray. Mr. Harrington, I didn't know. That's the point. Marcus stopped in front of him. You're fired. Collect your things and be off the property within the hour. Bruno opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. He walked towards the door with his head down. Marcus continued through the crowd. Jennifer Lawson, you stole food from the kitchen and blamed it on the junior staff. A blonde maid burst into tears. Please, I have bills. You're fired. Derek Thompson, you've been selling information about this family to tabloid reporters for the past 6 months. A driver went pale. That's not... I have the bank records. You're fired. One by one, Marcus named them. The liars, the thieves, the petty tyrants who had made life miserable for anyone they deemed beneath them. 8 people were dismissed in total, in front of their peers. When he finished, Marcus turned to his father. Harrington Sr. sat in his wheelchair, his body frail, but his eyes sharp as ever. He had watched the entire proceeding in silence. Well? Marcus asked. The old man smiled, a thin, tired smile that carried the weight of years. You did well, son. His voice was barely above a whisper. Your mother would be proud. Marcus nodded once. Then he turned to face the woman still standing in handcuffs at the center of the foyer. Grace Williams, the maid who had given a stranger her last dollar. Officers, Marcus said, remove those handcuffs, now. The handcuffs fell away. Grace rubbed her wrists, the red marks already forming on her skin. She didn't look at Marcus. Couldn't look at him. The past 24 hours had been a hurricane, and she was still trying to find solid ground. Grace. His voice was different now, softer. The billionaire's authority stripped away, leaving something more vulnerable underneath. I don't know what you want me to say, Grace whispered. Thank you. Are you welcome? I'm sorry for yelling at you in the garden shed. You don't owe me an apology. I lied to you. You had your reasons. That doesn't make it right. Grace finally looked up. Marcus stood before her, not as Daniel the gardener, not as Marcus Harrington III the billionaire, but as something in between, a man who had seen her at her lowest and watched her give away everything she had. Why me? She asked. You could have tested anyone. You could have given your little speech about loyalty and character to anyone in this room. Why does it matter that I passed? Marcus was quiet, for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded $100 bill. Her $100 bill. Do you know what most people would have done if they saw a stranger struggling in a garden? He asked. They would have walked past, maybe felt bad for a moment, maybe told themselves they'd help if they could afford to. But you... His voice caught. You couldn't afford it, Grace. You needed that money for your daughter's medicine, and you gave it to me anyway. Anyone would have... No. Marcus shook his head firmly. I've spent 3 weeks in this house. I've watched every person on this staff, and not one of them, not a single one, showed me an ounce of genuine kindness. Except you. He pressed the $100 back into her hand. I don't want your money, Grace said. I know. That's why I'm not offering you money. Grace frowned. Then what? This estate needs a new manager. Marcus gestured at the foyer around them. Someone with integrity, someone who treats people with dignity regardless of their position, someone who understands what it means to struggle and still choose kindness. Grace's heart stopped. You're not serious. Full salary, 3 times what Victoria was making, because she was stealing the difference anyway. Complete benefits package for you and Chloe. The cottage on the East Garden. It has 3 bedrooms, a yard, and it's close enough to the main house that you'll never be far from work. Marcus paused. And Chloe's medical expenses will be covered entirely, for as long as she needs. Grace couldn't breathe. You gave a stranger your last dollar, Marcus said quietly. That's not kindness, Grace. That's character. And character can't be bought. It can't be taught. It can only be recognized. He stepped closer. I'm recognizing yours. Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks. She didn't try to stop them. What about us? She whispered. What about whatever this is? Marcus smiled. A real smile, the first one she had seen from him. I'd like to find out, if you'll let me. He extended his hand. But not as a billionaire and a maid, as equals, partners, 2 people who see each other clearly. Grace looked at his hand, then at the $100 bill in her palm, then at the man who had turned her world upside down and somehow set it right again. She took his hand. Partners, she said. And for the first time in years, Grace Williams didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. She gave away her last dollar, not because she could afford to, not because she expected anything in return, but because she saw someone hurting and chose compassion over comfort. And that single act of kindness changed everything. Because character isn't measured by what you do when people are watching, it's measured by what you do when you think no one important will ever know. Grace Williams thought she was helping a stranger. She was really meeting her future. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Every week, we share stories about ordinary people who choose extraordinary kindness. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe rewards them for it. Don't miss the next one. Your moment might be coming too.